Welcome to this afternoon's Wheelhouse Talk with Cathy Crosby, CEO Emeritus of Goodwill Industries of Greater Grand Rapids and newly elected trustee to the Grand Rapids Community College Board. The Hallenstein Center's Cook Leadership Academy is excited to bring this talk to campus. My name is Anna Zalay, and I am a second-year Cook Leadership Academy Fellow. It is my pleasure to welcome you here. I'm in my final year at Grand Valley studying public and nonprofit administration with an emphasis in finance and minor in German. I am thankful to be a part of the Cook Leadership Academy, not only because I have the opportunity to meet and learn from fellow student leaders, but established leaders in the Grand Rapids community as well. As you might already know, the Hallenstein Center's Wheelhouse Talks highlight the philosophies and experiences of leaders from a variety of disciplines, communities, and cultures. These individuals take center stage to share their experiences and perspectives with us. Their lessons help us to charter our own paths forward and provide a blueprint toward reaching our goals. The Wheelhouse Talks are a space for reflection and innovative learning. They are a call to arms for anyone seeking to create and foster positive change, a celebration of human endeavors, and the potential within all of us. Now, to introduce our speaker. Cathy Crosby has worked for Goodwill in varying capacities since 1980. For the past 12 years, she has served as the president and CEO of the Goodwill Industries of Greater Grand Rapids and recently transitioned into serving as CEO Emeritus of the organization. Currently, Goodwill of Grand Rapids is a $35 million organization serving 8 counties in West and Central Michigan. Cathy's first alma mater is Siena Heights University in Adrian, Michigan, where she earned a Bachelor of Arts in Business Administration and her Master's in Organizational Leadership. She also earned an Executive MBA at the R.H. Smith School of Business at the University of Maryland and has attended the Aspen Institute Leadership Seminar in Aspen, Colorado. Cathy has quite the resume. In fact, it's so long I do not have time to read it all. But Cathy has 3 times been named one of the most 50 influential businesswomen in West Michigan by the Grand Rapids Business Journal. She received the 2013 Communication and Leadership Award from Toastmasters International, the 2012 YMCA Tribute Award in Business, Management, Industry, and Labor, and in 2011 she received the ATHENA Award from the Grand Rapids Area Chamber of Commerce. Cathy and her husband Eugene have been married for 49 years, and they have 2 children and 3 grandchildren. Please join me in welcoming Cathy Crosby, CEO Emeritus of Goodwill Industries of Greater Grand Rapids, to the stage.
The reason I have a long resume, of course, is I've had so many birthdays. Once you add up all of those work years and birthdays, it starts adding up. How very nice to see all of you today. I really want to start by thanking Chad Downing and Gleaves Whitney for inviting me and for allowing me to be part of the Peter Cook Leadership Program, because it's been an important part of my time in Grand Rapids to participate in getting to know the students and mentoring. So thank you all. I really, really appreciate it. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal story and how it brought me to the executive office, so to speak. Because very honestly, at a younger age, I couldn't have imagined. I've had the life I could have never dreamed of. And I think to understand how that happens is to understand life's journey and to encourage each of you to begin to remember what's happened in your life and keep growing with your story. So my story does have a lot of chapters these days. Since I didn't get married at 5 and I've been married 49 years, the math gets pretty simple. And so there's a lot of chapters in this book, but I'm going to focus on 3 of them that I think have had the greatest impact on the leader that I have become. And the first of those is definitely those formative years of my childhood. So I grew up on a small farm in North Oakland County, on really the end of the dirt road, so to speak. And it was an idyllic life for a child. We had 40 acres of fruit trees and vegetable gardens and a few small animals. And I am the youngest of a collection of children. And my mother and dad actually had 4 birth children, and I'm the youngest by enough I'm not in the family pictures. My next closest sib is 8 years, and then there's 12, and then there's 14. And so it's kind of like they thought they were done, and then Cathy came along. That kind of means that I was raised in the 50s with a 1930s upbringing. The kitchen had a wood stove in it. There was an electric stove there in the corner too, but Mother didn't trust it very much. She was pretty sure the oven was off. And there was a windmill at the top of the hill in the orchard that pumped our water and brought it down to the farmhouse. It was a simple life. My parents had lived through the Great Depression, and they wanted self-sufficiency and independence for their family. So, in addition to the 4 of us birth children, my parents took in 9 foster children. Now, when my parents were taking in foster children, there was no social service entity that was deciding how that should work. The Davidson family lived on a street behind us in a little town called Waterford before we moved to the farm. And there were 6 Davidson children, and they were ages 4 to 14 when Mrs. Davidson died. It didn't take long for Mr. Davidson to become overwhelmed. He drank quite a bit, and one day he just walked away and left the kids. Mom and Dad were young, and the neighbors had been close. And so Mom and Dad invited all 6 of the children to come and live with us. And they did. There wasn't any talk about who was going to pay for 6 extra children. There wasn't any thought that there wasn't room in the little house that we had. The youngest, Martha, asked my mother if she could have chocolate cake every day. That was part of her negotiations. But beyond that, Mom and Dad just reached out and knew that they could make a difference for the 6 children. After that, there were others. The Clark family had 13 children, and during all the rationing of World War II, they were having a hard time raising all 13, and their best friends stepped in and started helping, and finally Peggy Clark just came to live with us, and by the time I arrived, I just thought she was one of my sisters. She lived at our house. When Mr. McCafferty died in World War II and his wife was having trouble raising all of their children, young Janine and my sister Donna were the same age. Miss McCafferty agreed that Janine would be better off with Mom and Dad and Donna Kay. And Janine came to live with us. There was never a thought in my parents' mind that there wasn't one more bed, one more chair for the table, or enough food to feed all the kids that they could possibly help make a difference for. I think I was around 10 when I finally insisted Mom and Dad tell me who I was really related to. I could not keep track. Everybody was a brother or a sister, and yet we had all these different last names. So I knew there was something in the mix, and I soon appreciated how lucky I was to have such giving parents, because I brought a girlfriend home too, whose parents had kicked her out of the house, and Mom said, sure, just come and live with us. My parents lived a life of caring for their family, for their community, for their friends. They really wanted to make a difference. But then there's another person, another character in this part of the story. Her name is Wilhelmina Carlene Schultz Mertens, my grandmother. She came here as a young immigrant with her parents, of course, went to school till she was 8 years old in Detroit, and then married my grandfather when she was 17. She was as hardworking a woman as ever lived, and her life was from another era. So when my grandfather died and she moved out to the farm with us, she became a dear friend as well as grandma. She had all the patience with me. She'd be in the fields harvesting with us. Dad was very fussy about who touched his crops. They had to be picked right so the next year's crop wasn't ruined. He didn't like people picking his strawberries and stomping on them, and he didn't like people picking the apple trees the wrong way. So the family took care of that, Grandma included, and then she was very much part of the effort to preserve that food for different times of year, because that was all part of the independence. The food Dad grew was either preserved and put away to feed the extended family, or it was used to barter for the things we didn't grow with our other neighbors who maybe were raising beef or had dairy. And Mom and Dad had lots of apples and fruits and vegetables. Grandma also loved to sew, and she taught me to quilt on a treadle sewing machine. She taught me to make my own clothes. In the 50s, my sister and I would go with my dad to the feed and supply store, which was really just where Dad would pick up seeds and things to feed our small animals. But back in that day, there were no plastic bags on anything. And in fact, the feed was in calico cloth bags that were sewn all the way around. My sister and I knew if we could find 2 matching bags, we could make a pleated skirt. And if we could find 3 matching bags, we could have a full skirt. So Dad would let us tag along to pick out the bags that the feed was in. So when the feed got emptied out, we could wash the material and sew it into some of our clothing. Grandma also helped me learn to crochet, to tat. How many of you know about tatting? We made lace. And she was very, very good at knowing how to preserve and conserve every resource. Nothing wasted with Grandma. And so there she was with her granddaughter as a dedicated student every day. One day, Mom and Dad went on an outing and left Grandma and I home alone, and we baked 9 apple pies. She was busy teaching me how to bake. We had 9 different recipes, and when Mom and Dad came home, the whole pantry shelf was apple pies Grandma and I had baked that day. And it was the kind of project that she was perfectly willing to indulge in with me. But my greatest teacher in those days was my mother, Ethel Margaret. Her nickname was Tootie. Tootie was a woman before her time. She was determined to get a high school diploma, and she had to pay tuition to get to high school. But she and her girlfriend May worked in the potato fields, picked potatoes, got paid by the bushel basket, and used that money to pay the tuition to go to high school. Mama played basketball in high school. We have great pictures of her in a skirt playing guard on the basketball team. And she was so proud. She was determined. And so Mom set a great example. During the Depression, Mom worked at Pontiac State Hospital. She was able to get a job because she had a high school diploma. My dad didn't. He dropped out of school in 7th grade, and he kind of bounced around from the gas station to handyman jobs. But Mama was able to work, and it made a big difference for the family. And so after the Depression and after World War II, they were able to buy the farm and settle the family into a steady place to live. Mama taught kindness. From promising to bake a little girl chocolate cake every day, to taking food to her sister and to her neighbors when they weren't feeling well, no matter how much work she had to do, she was very focused on being kind to other people. And she would tell us kids, you cannot be too kind or too generous. She was generous. She loved to make sure that if she had something, she would share it. She wasn't going to keep the best for herself, and then if there were leftovers, give them away. Mama had a real philosophy of we give the best away, and we'll be fine with what's left. And she taught me the rewards of learning. Because she was so passionate about going to school herself, she really wanted her girls to learn how to appreciate education. If I did well or got all my chores done at home, the reward I would get was a sandwich in a picnic basket and a blanket and a book to read in the orchard. I worked my way through the Bobbsey twins in the 1950s to Ayn Rand in the 60s, but Mama always made sure I had a book. And if life was going well, then I had time for a picnic and a book to read in the sunshine. My dad was the patriarch. He had a plan for every one of his kids. For the older boys, that meant the recruiter came to the house on high school graduation day. Dad knew where they needed to go. He was a patriot. He had served. His girls, well, my sister Donna went in the Navy too. Carlene was born with a vision disability. Dad wanted her to have an education so she could take care of herself. I got sent to typing classes. He wanted us to be self-sufficient. He was the planner, and he needed to know we'd be okay when he was gone. So if you put that all together and start to think about me being in the nonprofit world all of these years, those years were the foundation of my life. Those are the years and experiences that laid down a really important foundation for me. The farm setting and the meager resources, an extended family, Tootie's influence, and Dad's plans. It all came together to create values for me that I rely on today. They're the authentic self that I am. And when I have decisions to make, it's where I go to think about what's the right thing to do. I often reflect on those moments with my book in a basket in the orchard, with Grandma in the kitchen, with Mama delivering food to someone else, to remind me of what's really important. So that's phase one. The next part of my story really begins in 1969 because that's when I married Eugene. January of 1969. Lord, we were young. You know, we met drag racing, just so you know a little bit about me. There was a paved road. It was new pavement. It was very exciting. The truth of the matter was it turned out to be the I-75 running through the back of the farm. But long before the road was open, we'd go out there and race on that nice, flat, brand-new pavement. I'm sure that's not what was intended. Every so often, we'd meet the Oakland County Sheriff there, like he was watching for us. But Eugene loved speed, and he had a 1948 Willys Jeep with a 350 Chevy engine in it. Any motor people here? It was shimmed. It was great. I just had an Oldsmobile. Why I ever thought I could beat that kid was beyond me. And it was maddening that no matter how hard I would try, he would fly by me and then slow right down because he knew I couldn't get around him. One day, long after we were done trying to beat each other on the flat pavement, I just followed him right to his house to tell him how rude I thought he was. And before we were done, he asked me out, and so it goes. So in January of 1969, I was a clerk at Consumers Energy, using those typing skills Dad insisted I have. And Eugene was a heavy equipment mechanic, Pontiac tractor and equipment, doing equipment repaired, working on his journeyman's card. We couldn't afford a house, not in those days. We bought a mobile home and started to build our life. And in the fall of 1969, I got pregnant. And I promptly got fired by Consumers Energy. That was the way of the world. They did not want expectant mothers working for them. You had 3 months to quit or you got fired. They were not carrying you on their insurance. They weren't putting up with you being absent if you didn't feel well. They just had a policy. We don't employ pregnant women. And since the Pregnancy Rights Act didn't pass till 1973, it was all perfectly legal. So 1970, I got sent home. And you know what? Not anybody was excited about hiring me because they just assumed I was going to have more kids. And they didn't want to deal with that either. And I did. 1972, I got pregnant again. Our son was born. But we needed to buy a house. The mobile home was getting small. And I was having a very hard time finding anywhere to work until 1976. And I did find a job with the local school district as a classroom aide. Gene had been working 2 jobs to keep the bills paid. He had earned his journeyman's card, but we were finally able to buy a house. A fixer-upper, believe me, a real fixer-upper, but it was ours. The mortgage interest rate was 10.25%. Of course, most of you don't remember those days, but we thought it was a blessing. My brother bought his house at 12%. It was a mess. A little bit of inflation going on. But we were making it until 1980 in the spring, when the recession hit really hard. Gas was being rationed, the auto industry was in the tank, unemployment was high, and I got laid off by the school district. So we were going to keep that 10.25% mortgage. I needed to find another job. I looked all summer. It was a chore, because I had to go to the unemployment office. That meant taking 2 kids there. That wasn't fun for them. And then we had to get to the gas station and hope we could get our ration of gas. That usually took an hour to an hour and a half in line. After we got our ration of gas, then we dared to go to the bank to cash the unemployment checks. So there were routines that we were going through that were eating up time. I probably should have been looking for work. And then when I would try to look for work, with only a high school diploma, a little time at Consumers Energy, a little time in the classroom, I never seemed to quite be the ideal candidate. Till the fall of 1980. And a friend of mine said, you know, Goodwill Industries is opening a new program in North Oakland County. You should go there. They help people find work. And I've long said, the best day of my life, the luckiest day, instead of turning me over to their job placement department, they hired me. I was hired as a clerk receptionist. I really could keyboard pretty well, type at the time, they said. And I had to take a first big adventure. I had never driven south of 14 Mile Road on I-75 in my life. I was a country girl. And I had to go all the way down to Grand River and the Lodge, to where Goodwill was, and meet with the human resources people, and then find my way over to Forest Street and take a physical, and then come back for orientation. I was so frightened, I could hardly stand it. But I needed that job. And so there was motivation, and I went. What I found at Goodwill was a mentor. That's what made it so exciting for me. The man who hired me took it upon himself to question me and encourage me. Why did you never go on to school? Have you ever thought of going to college? What if you just took a class? Maybe you could just audit and see if you like it. Relentless, persistent, encouraging me. In 1982, I started going to Oakland Community College. No online learning, just to point that out. Every class meant going right from work to the classroom, or it was Saturday morning and finding someone to stay with the kids or get them to wherever they needed to go. In all fairness to my daughter and son, I have no idea how many softball games I missed, how many dance practices I wasn't the mom there, how many basketball games. Because just as they were in their teens, I was deciding to go to school. I got my associate's degree in business from Oakland Community College in 5 years, going part-time. I could not have imagined as a child what that would feel like or what that would mean. I was so fortunate to find mentors along the way and other people to encourage me. And so when I finished that associate's degree, I went to Siena Heights University in Adrian and continued my education. In 1993, I earned a bachelor's degree. Unless any of you ever contemplate whether it's worth doing it, going back to school, I was 45. With a brand new degree, with a new sense of self. But then I was hooked, very honestly. And so I just stayed. As long as I'm going, I might as well keep going, right? And so I kept going, and I got a master's degree. And back at Goodwill, when I got my associate's degree, they made me a supervisor. I earned my bachelor's degree, and I was appointed director of human resources. I loved it. I went and studied for my certificate in senior professional human resources from the HR Association and kept learning. When I got my master's in organizational leadership, I became the vice president of human services. So many people along the way that I remember how they helped me, and just that moment I didn't think I could pass one more test. The controller became my best friend during finance, of course, and I never did quite get the hang of statistics. If any of you are good at it, I admire you right now. I think I've had to take that class 3 times and have worked my way from a C- to a B, but that's it. And that's only because now you can do it with a computer. Back with the slide rule and equations, no, it wasn't working for me. But I must tell you that I got hooked on it, and I tried very hard to extract from every one of those experiences more than just what was in the book. Because I would find myself in every class with a new group of people, new perspectives, new ideas, new questions, and it fed my curiosity and my penchant for learning. Goodwill supported me all along. If you can imagine, when you had to be at a 6 o'clock class in Adrian, you can't get there if you leave Detroit at 5. There was a lot of flexibility in scheduling. There were a lot of times I think they would have liked me to work Saturday, then I was in a classroom instead. But all through those years, they pushed me and supported me. I was encouraged to take risks. I didn't take risks. Daddy planned my life. I certainly didn't argue with him, and it didn't occur to me that I might have an idea he didn't agree with. But the more that I learned, the more I was encouraged to use that learning to take new ideas forward and risk that they would be rejected. And it was okay. They rejected the idea, not me. Me they kept, and we kept growing together. And I learned to take risks. Until 1999, when everything changed again, and Goodwill International in Bethesda, Maryland, called my CEO in Detroit and said, "Do you have anybody who knows anything about running a grant program? Because we just got a big grant. We could use some help." And she volunteered my time. Now, you've heard my story. If you can think just a minute, suddenly I was flying to Washington, D.C. every week for 2 or 3 days. The first time I got off the plane there, I thought I was just going to faint on the sidewalk. There were so many people, and it was so busy, and they expected me to hail a cab, oh Lord, or get on the metro. And however it was going to work out, I'd never done any of it before. And so there was this moment of, take a deep breath. I felt a little bit like Mary Tyler Moore, throw her hat in the air and say, oh, look, I made it from Minneapolis, because everything seemed so wondrous and so strange. I did that for about 3 months, and then they said, would you just come here and work? We can't find anybody to do this job. And Eugene, I remember that great guy I married? I called him and I said, they want me to move here. And he said, I think it's your turn. I think we should do it. And so we moved. The next 6 years were pretty fantastic. I was there through a very strange time. Moving down there in 1999 means I lived in Washington through 9/11, through the anthrax scare, through the Maryland sniper. It was nothing like Oakland County. Couldn't have been farther from Oakland County. I visited 83 Goodwills in the United States, Canada, Guam, the Canal Zone. What a change. What an opportunity. Eugene went to work for Georgia Pacific. Still, I always say he's way more employable than me. He's a journeyman mechanic, for heaven's sakes. He kind of sits until he wants to go to work, and then there's usually people that just want him. So he worked for Georgia Pacific. And we spent 6 years there, and it was great. And then we just missed our family so much. We were looking for a way to get back to Michigan. And I applied for the job in Grand Rapids. 2006. Well, I have to tell you, I learned a lot of things while I was in DC. I learned that mentoring really does matter. If the mentors here mattered, at Detroit, when I got down there, I don't know what I would have done without them. I know now that we grow when we welcome the future and adapt to it. I didn't succeed just because I knew how things worked in Detroit. I succeeded in DC because I was willing to reach out and meet new ideas. They are a little bit different, perhaps, in their thinking in the Beltway from us here. And there really is value in new experiences. So I got to bring all of that back with me. And in 2006, I've got to tell you, I was honestly surprised I got this job. For one thing, 2006. Okay, I'm not 35 anymore. Two, this Goodwill had never hired anybody into that job that wasn't from Grand Rapids. The board, fabulous board, but very enculturated in West Michigan. I didn't really know a thing about the community. A lot of snow that first winter. I learned the word lake effect. I learned how many clouds were here. But that isn't what the board cared about. The board that hired me really wanted Goodwill to be known and valued by the community. They believed Goodwill should be growing. They wanted this Goodwill to be an asset, and we all know we invest in assets to keep them. They wanted the mission, the power of work, to grow in its impact and its value. So they offered me the job. I've got a lot of Goodwill knowledge. I have never been a CEO before, but that challenge was mine. I had to create a plan to learn about our community. It's special. Every community is. It wasn't easy in DC to get to know DC compared to Detroit. I can remember the first meeting I went into there, I thought they were going to kick me out. It was purely a communication challenge. And now I was leaving DC and coming to Grand Rapids. It required research. I had to learn to take some risks here to get to know people. I needed to meet key people and listen. Because here, our community has a great many people who want this community to succeed, and they each have their own reasons. I needed to hear them, listen to their dreams for Grand Rapids, understand their commitment to the community. The first time I ever met Peter Secchia, a member of our board of directors, insisted I needed to meet him and arranged for me to meet him at 7 o'clock in the morning at the Amway for breakfast. I did my research. Who's Peter Secchia? I looked at some of the things he had done in the community, even read about Universal Forest Products. I walked in to meet him. His son Charlie was with him, and the very first words out of his mouth is, "I'm not giving you any money." Okay, I'm not here to ask for any, so we'll be fine. I promise I'm not here to ask for a dime. He went on to tell me, though, why he loved Grand Rapids, why he invested the money he had here, what he wanted Charlie to find here, who the people here were that mattered to him so very much. And I would say, just to digress, if you ever have the chance to go online to Failure Lab and listen to Peter's Failure Lab speech, you'll be amazed at what you hear about who he is and what drives him. Probably not quite what you think. The listening effort took more than a year. I spent more than a year going through a list of names handed to me by board members or talking to Peter. He recommended someone else. Listening to their dreams, listening to their vision for the community, listening to why it was so important that Greater Grand Rapids be a successful place. It challenged my thinking and my views. I'd never heard some of what was shared with me in those meetings. But I took that and I began to create a value proposition for the enterprise that is Goodwill of Greater Grand Rapids, something our board could embrace and the community could support. West Michigan appreciates socially engaged businesses. We have many. There are more B corporations here than any other single community. You have opportunities to see it in action with Cascade Engineering and other sizable firms. And so the idea that Goodwill would be socially responsible but self-sufficient was clearly important. And I set out to improve that. I built 12 stores in 10 years. I would hear people say, "There's another store." "Oh, but there's another store." And I would say, "Yep, it's true." There's another store. We have 20 stores today. Being cautious now, having built for a couple years while the whole sorting out of what's going to happen to retail happens, which also has an impact on thrift. But that revenue gave us new ability to pursue the mission and to do more for the community. This community loves the environment. I have to tell you, nowhere that I've ever traveled in the United States have I ever found a greater commitment to taking care of the land and the water and our environment. So that meant for Goodwill that recycling, selling commodities, opening an outlet, expanding online sales, everything had to be on the table so we were not throwing things out. People give us things to do good. We should not be throwing them away. So we have to find a way to turn them into revenue. And we looked at every option, partnering with Kent County on the recycling side, partnering with other Goodwills for online sales, opening a by-the-pound store when things didn't sell in the store, selling books on Amazon so they didn't end up simply being recycled. Whatever we could do to get the greatest value from every donation. And Grand Rapids appreciates collaboration, especially in the nonprofit sector. And so we stepped back from doing things that we weren't the best at and partnered with other organizations. We do jobs best. We stay with people a whole year after we find them a job. We do training. We're about employment. We're not about housing. We partner with ICCF and the Dwelling Pace and others. We're not about healthcare. We partner with Cherry Street Health and Network 180 and others. We learned to put our resources into what we do best. We have an obligation to understand our communities when we are nonprofits, because that's who we serve. And my time today is still largely devoted to appreciating and hearing and understanding what all of you care about, so we know what Goodwill can do better. But then you know what? I had to professionally participate myself, not just be a taker. So much has been given to me. And so you heard some of the things I've participated in. I had to learn to be authentic and live my values here like I have everywhere, to share my talents and give my time and extend myself, because so much has been graciously given to me for so long. So what does this tell us about leadership? I think to lead effectively, you have to understand who you are and where you are. Who are you leading? What matters to them? And how does your story mesh with theirs? Understand not just what's expected today and this moment, but what your shared view of tomorrow is. Connect with people. Much of leadership success is related to emotional intelligence. I think empathy is incredibly important. When I interview employees, I interview for empathy. I don't know how you can build trust without empathy. And why would you follow someone you don't trust? It's a key to developing trust with anyone. And so empathy becomes critical, as is a commitment to service, the privilege of leadership. What I do is such a privilege. And to have that privilege requires a real return, service, and a commitment beyond self. So, in summary, I think you get authenticity from knowing your story. You need to be authentic in what you do. I always tell my staff, Lord, I remember when I went on Facebook, brilliant young man said to me, why do you have 2 Facebook pages? I said, well, one's for work, one's for my private life. Why, are there 2 of you? Well, no. I would think that what I learned most from my employees in the last decade is there has to be just one Cathy Crosby. No matter where you meet me, where you see me, what I'm doing, what the challenge is, you should know what to expect of me. I can't play roles. I need to be authentic. And you got to be bold. You know, it doesn't sound like a big deal, but driving south of 14 Mile alone on I-75 was a really scary thing for me. Flying to Washington, D.C. alone was a really scary thing. And if I could tell you how I felt when I got off the plane in Guam the first time to visit Goodwill there, ugh. But it's a protectorate, and they've had Goodwill there since World War II, and off I went. We have to take those experiences and take that feeling we get, that boldness that we're able to find in ourselves, and use it for decision making. Use it for leading our organizations. Use it to communicate with people. We have to keep learning, not just in classrooms. We have to be curious. We have to learn from the experiences we have. We have to seek new opportunities in order to be current and up to date in what we're doing. And then all of that won't matter if we're not empathetic, because that's how we'll build relationships with others. So those are the 3 big stages of my story I'm sharing. There's been others, some not so fun, some more fun. I expect 2019 is about to launch a new chapter for me. That GRCC excitement, I'm going to go learn more about being a trustee. I'm excited about the possibilities. My daughter recently told me, she lives here, works in West Michigan. She told me I have a servant heart. And I'm so grateful to hear that from her, because my mother gave me so many lessons about what matters, and it tells me I'm sharing lessons with my children as well that I hope will matter in their lives. most important of those lessons, of course, is generosity, as far as I'm concerned. It's a powerful force. It opens doors, it creates relationships, it gives us perspective. It paves the way for us to move forward into the future with hope when we're generous with others, when we connect with them. And so I'd like to just leave you with this. Leaders move us from here to there. It's a position that carries motion, a journey to a new tomorrow. The best leaders light the way. May each of you shine your light on the pathway to tomorrow for others to follow. Thank you.
So you talked about how being bold is a really good foundational step of being a leader. When you walked off that plane in Washington, D.C., what was going through your mind? I know you said it was like a completely different world, everything was busy, but how did you go from the small town girl, you said also, first step of leadership, you need to know who you are. So if you knew you were someone who wasn't a big risk taker, you didn't have those steps, how did you change your mind from being something like, oh, I don't know if I can do this, to I have to take that step?
I think that's when knowing your story and who you are can make a big difference. Mm-hmm. What I did know is that I trusted people. I'm not sure I could have built this career without trusting people. And what that allows you to do in every new setting is to say help, mm-hmm. to ask the question to get what you need. To be brutally honest, people are not always kind in different cultural settings. I would say the speed, the pace, the relationships in DC, it was very unnerving at first. But I learned to politely ask for help, which was a bit novel, gave away I wasn't from there, I think, a lot of days. But it made me feel like I had something in my own toolbox that was going to help me get from here to there. So I do think that we have to know, if we're not going to be able to ask for help, then maybe we're the planner, which I'm not, that's going to have everything lined up so you don't think you need a lot of help. Mm-hmm. But for me, it was, I'm on the sidewalk, I've got a suitcase, I'm supposed to get to Hotel ABC, I don't even know where it is. And there's no GPS, and I've never hailed a cab in my life. Help. Somebody's got to help me here. Once we do something, we get confidence from it. We think we can do one more thing. But use what you know about yourself to get over that hill. Every day we should do something we think we can't do. It's the best advice I ever got. You have to tackle what you think you can't do. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Uh-oh.
No. I'm the one saying, uh-oh. This is just a remarkable story, Cathy. Thank you so much for sharing at such a deep level what your leadership journey and your life journey have been. I have two questions for you. First, I'd like to know, your mother, the people in your childhood, remarkable people, where did their values come from that they were passing on to you? And then second, I'd like to know about the toughest decision you ever had to make as a leader, and what did you draw on to make that decision?
Well, my mother and her family were German Lutheran, which speaks to, they brought a work ethic with them from Europe that was very structured. It's what you did. My great-grandmother, when she got here, opened a boarding house down on Mack Avenue in Detroit. My oldest sister remembers riding on the ice wagon through the streets of Detroit. So I believe their values were rooted in the church community. And my mother lived to be 98. She died in 2014, and she had a sweatshirt that said Genuine Antique Lutheran on it. She was very, very proud of that. Now, my father was raised an Irish Catholic. That was a little stormy on occasion between my grandmothers, you know. But in any case, both women, both families were very generous and very caring and had their roots in a type of thinking that meant you helped each other. And I'm sure that grew during the Depression and during the World War. I try to picture my grandmother, who in World War II was the air raid warden in Waterford, with the little hat on and the flashlight, walking around, making sure everybody had their blinds drawn so you couldn't see the houses. And they were community-minded in their service. So they brought all of that with them and obviously cultivated it here. Even as they moved outside of the German community in Detroit and moved into other ethnic groups, they were very much committed to family, church, community, all of the things that were the values they brought with them. The hardest leadership decision. Well, this may not go the way you thought it would going to go. Gleaves knows, and not everybody knows. So I am a multiple-time cancer survivor. I was diagnosed with multiple myeloma in 2012 and actually had a bone marrow transplant in 2013. It's a complicated cancer. The treatment's long and complicated. Goodwill was booming. 750 employees, almost 30 locations for business and service. I wasn't 50 anymore. I think one of the hardest decisions I ever had to sit down with the board and make was whether I would continue as CEO. There was real risk. You know, when I left for Ann Arbor for that bone marrow transplant, it's kind of a risky thing. You're going off, leaving the company behind, and we sat. Hospital people were so nice. I literally had a staff meeting in my hospital room one day and invited the board chair and key staff, and we had to sit there and decide what was really in Goodwill's best interest. And was I being too selfish, hanging on? Or should I let it go to someone guaranteed in better health in the moment? The employees were worried. It was affecting morale. But given a time and circumstance and contemplating, I will tell you all of my early values paid off because I said a little earlier, I hire for empathy. You know, I need trust with and from people. And it was indeed finally, it was my employees who all stepped up and convinced me I should stay with them because they wanted to stay with me. And so I made the decision not to resign. The board had already sent a letter out. They were willing to put someone in my office if I needed them to. But we sat together and I decided to go ahead. And obviously I've been blessed. I've been in remission for a number of years. I'm glad I stayed. But when you have that many people depending on you for a paycheck, their livelihood, the community needs your mission, you're trying to do good things, you know, you're trying to decide, am I really just being selfish hanging on? What's best for all those people who have a vested interest? So I think that was it. I think it was the hardest decision I ever made. It turned out well, but it was not easy.
Hi there, my name is Paige. I'm at the Cook Leadership Academy. I just want to thank you for coming here today. It's really important for us to hear these words. I actually just want to ask you, so you've had your experience with cancer, you've gone through remission, and with that being said, how has that impacted your ability to empathize with your employees, with your board members? Do you think it's had an impactful change in your life? I would imagine so, but how?
Well, it's made me a healthcare advocate, Paige, if nothing else. I mean, I come out of this, you know, vastly different perspective on our healthcare system than going in. And in 2017, I had a whole different kind of cancer again. So then I got double educated. Has it changed my empathy? I'm sure it has helped to grow the respect that I have for everyone who struggles every day with some key piece of their life not fitting into the mold they thought it would. And that's not just healthcare. You know, I have employees with cancer, and I have employees who are dealing with their house burned last week, and I have employees dealing with, you know, other catastrophes in their life. When you have to put your life back together yourself, you have a better understanding of what it means to get through when so much is going wrong. And I think, yeah, your empathy grows, but constructively it also changes how you look at the world.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Kathy.
Hi.
I'm Mary with the Girl Scouts.
Oh, yes. Hi.
And I am interested, you have seen a lot of change with women in the workplace
I
over your
have.
career. And I'm interested in like your greatest lessons and words of wisdom for us as we move forward.
So I was a Girl Scout, as Mary might know. In fact, I'm one of those girls they kicked out when I graduated from high school, because you just can't stay forever in Girl Scouts. So went to camp, Sherwood, as a child, did my tippy test. So yeah, Girl Scouts are good. What I think is so complicated right now for a couple of generations is that it's changed so fast. So I'm 70. I got fired for being pregnant. It was perfectly legal, right? 1973, the Pregnancy Rights Act changed. Now you can stay in the classroom, but that's about all that changed. My sister was a teacher. She could teach and be pregnant, but she couldn't wear maternity clothes to work. That was the school district policy. So her shirtwaist was belted way up here because she had to wear a full skirt to deal with being pregnant because they didn't allow maternity clothes. You know, it's the increments of change that have happened for women. I'm on the board of the YMCA, and so we're constantly dealing now with how can we provide more and better childcare so more women can go to work, because that's still an incredible barrier. And then I think in every instance we see where there are examples, not always everybody, nothing's everybody or nobody, but examples where women are perhaps not treated the same in a like role. I've kind of felt bad for Mary Barra this past week. I don't know about any of the rest of you, but some of the, you know, slapping around she got, I kept saying, I just kind of wonder if Roger Smith was still there, how that'd go. But what I have seen is a lot of progress, and even in this community in a decade, where we do see more women getting promoted into positions of responsibility and handling it very well, where we are seeing higher expectations for women to join the workplace in non-traditional roles, where, you know, even I have had opportunities I could not have imagined when it was 1950, really, compared to getting a job as I did in 2006. I've watched the Goodwill enterprise go from having 7 female CEOs in 1990, not that long ago, to almost 50% of all the Goodwills in North America having a female CEO today. So there is progress being made, but it's being made still with real sacrifice. I doubt that anybody would argue wages are not where they need to be. Childcare is not where it needs to be. To level the playing field is going to take policy change and hard work. There are too few women on the corporate boards of America. We need a greater voice there. But it is having more women in place, changing what leadership looks like. And leadership is what's going to get all of us through difficult times so that we come out in a better place. It's that getting from here to there and seeing a better tomorrow. So I think it's getting better, Mary, but it's hard work. Yeah, we need advocates all over the place. Yep. Thank you all. You've been lovely. Thank you.